If you are a man identifying as a people pleaser, just know you're not alone. You're not alone at all. And there's no shame in admitting it. And there is absolutely no shame in doing something about it. We have an intrinsic motivation. We really want to do this. We want to have this business. We want to coach people. We want to help people who might be, we might just be a little bit further along the way and we can help them. People are of service and they are people pleasers at the same time. But it's just a matter of time before they burn out, because when you people please by being of service to others, you forget yourself, you forget your needs, you don't respect your own boundaries, you don't know when to rest, when to say no, etc.
Hello, my love. Welcome to another episode of Blisstopia podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Castellani, and today we're going to be talking about people pleasing. We had an episode, I think it was at the end of last year, which is episode 128 with Stefanie Gerke, who is specialized in supporting people pleasers. And today it's kind of like part 2 of that episode because we had such an amazing conversation last time and we just vibed together. And I think we just love exchanging and learning and having different perspectives together. So we thought about bringing this part 2 about people pleasing. So Stefanie Gerke, she helps sensitive people pleasers do less of what they don't need to do more of what they actually want to do with more calm and ease. And I'm super happy to be having this conversation. I love how Stefanie always brings so much depth, so much nuances into this work. So welcome, Stefanie, to the show. I'm super happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me again. I loved our first conversation and I'm looking forward to your smart questions.
So if you're interested in this topic, the people pleasing topic, I would suggest to kind of like stop this episode, go back into episode 128, because there we're kind of like laying the foundations, really understanding the psychological causes of people pleasing, the long-term costs of people pleasing. So I think it is quite important to listen to that episode first and then head over to this one, because this is really going into the depths of the topic and the nuances of the topic. But I would definitely recommend you to go back to that episode and then go ahead with this one, because we're really going deeper into this topic. So let's go back into your story, Steph, because when we discussed last time, you shared with us that you were in the art world. And at some point in your own journey, you realized that that was not your actual calling, that was not your actual purpose in life, and you realized that you needed to do some changes. So can we go back into that story and share with us, how did you realize that that first thing that you were doing, the world of art, even though it's really beautiful, it was more of a people pleasing tendency and not your actual purpose?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, because you would think that someone who studies art history, who sets up their own little agency for art and architecture tours in Berlin, would really feel the sense of purpose, because it's not a move that you do out of, calculation or because it seems like a smart thing to do. Studying art history was, in a sense, something where I felt a kind of purpose, because it's, it responded to some of my character traits, like being very sensitive. I could notice a lot of I'm very visually sensitive, so I can notice a lot of details in artworks. And so in a way, it was a fitting career path for me. But I realized there wasn't like this one point in my life where I was like, oh, sorry, this is not what I should be doing. Instead, this other thing is my purpose. It was more like a slow, like an evolving of things that where I was kind of moving in a way, or like taking the next steps that I thought other people might expect of me. And there wasn't ever really like a very serious conversation about this or anything, but I knew that, for example, my stepfather, he thinks very highly of my intellectual capabilities, which is nice. And so he had said at some point, yeah, maybe you can do a PhD in art history because you're very good at what you do. You get very good marks, very good grades in university. Maybe you could do a PhD. And he also has a PhD. And so, this kind of was in my mind, in the back of my mind, like, okay, people might expect me to do a PhD. And when the time actually came to decide what to do after studying, I had this in the back of my mind. I knew that I was capable of doing it. And I knew that, for example, the professor that I had done my master's with was also kind of keen on me doing a PhD. And there wasn't ever this moment where I was like, is this really for me? But in hindsight, I remember thinking, this PhD will crush me. I know that it will crush me. And it kind of did. It took me a long, long time to finish it. And it drove me nuts because it was such a huge project. And it was so much relying on my own ability to say no to a lot of other things, which I wasn't capable of doing. So I never carved out the time to really go into all the research. I did in the end. I mean, I did finish it, but it took me so long, so many years, because I was so bad at carving out time for it. And so I think that you can't say that there were those moments where I consciously chose to do what other people expected me to do, but subconsciously I did. And in hindsight, I can see that there were some points where I wish I had chosen differently. I had chosen a different path. I did not. And now I'm fine with my whole path because I know that it brought me here to this point, and I'm super happy where I am right now. But it was a pretty rough path. There was so much self-doubt along the way, so much, well, kind of like a burnout. It wasn't like a diagnosed burnout, but it was a series of depressive kind of states that I was in, and very, very low energy, and not feeling well on the inside at all. And so, I can see in hindsight that there were many decisions that I could have done differently, but I didn't. I never stopped to kind of think, like, what would please me in this instant? Like, what's the next career step that would please me?
Absolutely. And I think in anything that we choose, right? Whether that's a PhD, a master's, going for a promotion that requires you to work more, setting up your own business, all of those things require a lot of struggle and effort and just work to make it actually work. Whatever that is, we need to choose our heart. But the thing is, any of those projects is going to require a lot of hours, a lot of work. And if the motivation is subconsciously, I want to please someone else instead of this is what I've chosen, this is what would please me, when things get hard, because they will get hard at some point, we don't have like that extra grit that we would have if it's something that we've chosen. For example, now both of us, we have our own businesses. Of course, it's not always easy. It's not always rosy, but this is something that we've truly chosen in a very, very conscious manner, knowing that this is what it's going to please us. So when things get a little bit hard, we can be like, but I want this. So I don't care what it takes. I'm going to make it work.
Yes, exactly. So I think that you can distinguish between having an intrinsic motivation, which is, I think, the case for both of us right now. We have an intrinsic motivation. We really want to do this. We want to have this business. We want to coach people. We want to help people who might be, we might just be a little bit further along the way, and we can help them. And the other one is extrinsic motivation. And I was extrinsically motivated for most of my career. I might have chosen like the realm of art history, of art, from an intrinsic motivation, but what followed was extrinsically motivated for sure. And that means exactly when it gets hard, you question yourself so much. There's so much internal chatter, and there's so much comparison also with other people who might be intrinsically motivated to do the same thing that you're doing, which is then easier because you can endure the hard parts much better. but you don't know this. You can't see this from the outside, right? So yeah, you doubt yourself a lot. I doubted myself so much. And so I'm so happy to talk to you about this purpose thing, because
Yes.
I'm also interested in your point of view of what purpose actually is and how it shows up.
Me, I think purpose is this sense of direction. I think we can define it in different ways, but the way I see it is, what's the meaning of everything that we do? There is no intrinsic meaning, but what's the meaning that we find and we give to our lives first? And then that can have an impact on what we do as our job, in our business, or even in our family. So, what is the direction, the meaning that we are giving to this existence that otherwise it doesn't have any meaning? We're building meaning and we can change the meaning. We're allowed to change the meaning if we feel like the meaning that we came up with first is not the one that is suiting anymore, or if the meaning that society wants you to give to this life, it's not the meaning that you actually want to give to this human experience on earth. So I think for me, it's all about the meaning that we give. And then coming back to people pleasing, I think it's would be kind of like buying someone else's meaning, because we haven't built up our own inner strong meaning from ourselves. So we're buying definitions, we're buying meaning from other people, whether that's our family, our partners, society in general, because we haven't come up with a meaning that is strong enough, compelling enough.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me and with my story. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And I'm curious, because that's your own story, but because you work with people pleasers, I'm sure you've had several clients who came up with this situation as well, where because of the people pleasing tendencies, they weren't actually daring to find this meaning for their lives, to go after their life purpose. Maybe they found it and they don't find the courage to go after it. What has your experience coaching clients been like on this topic?
Yeah, there are a lot of clients who come to me with like a very specific kind of request, like, hey, I want to find meaning in my job, or I want to, or maybe they're in between jobs and they don't know what to look for next. And then it turns out that the people pleasing has kind of navigated them into directions, positions, jobs, roles in their jobs that they don't actually feel like they correspond with them or that really resonate with them. But they have said yes to things that were suggested to them. And they find themselves in this kind of, in a kind of stuck. And so what we work on is not actually finding like a new career or like applying to new jobs or anything, but we work on listening to that inner voice that they actually still hear and still they know that it's still there, but they have not listened to it for a long, long time. And they don't trust it completely. They think maybe I'm overreacting. I just need to, learn some new skills to cope with this new position in my job. No. So what we work on then is to really kind of scale back everything and peel back all the layers and get down to what actually will make a difference in their lives, which is looking at how they deal with their own emotions, how they deal with their needs, because our needs are shown through our emotions and our emotions are in our bodies. And people pleasers tend to not listen to their bodies at all. People pleasers tend to be in their heads and have their antennas out to figure out what everyone else thinks, might expect, might feel, and take responsibility for everyone else's feelings, thoughts, needs, etc., but not for their own. And so we change that around and we figure out ways to help them listen to themselves, listen to their bodies, accept their feelings, navigate their feelings better, not be overwhelmed too much by their feelings, and figure out their needs. And when that happens, what follows very naturally sometimes is a change in career. I've had several of my clients then report back to me at some point that they have become coaches as well, for example. Which is kind of a thing. I don't know if you experience that as well. Like a lot of people are doing coaching trainings now, and they might not actually then work as a coach, but maybe they just want the training. But some of my clients have actually become coaches. Some of my clients have fulfilled other kinds of dreams, like becoming a mom or something else. But I feel like that's got a lot to do with this kind of purpose and calling and this direction and meaning that you talked about, because it kind of, it's the result of listening to what your body, your heart, your mind is telling you is good for you and is right for you. And so listening to that makes all the difference, and actually learning to trust in that makes all the difference.
Absolutely. And I can really relate to that even from my own experience, because I think back in the days, I didn't know what my intuition was. I didn't trust it. And through meditation, my intuition kind of like naturally grew and developed. And I started feeling like these little hints when I was still in the marketing world as a marketing director. And I had these little hints first. It was like, it's not this, it's not this. And it was very subtle, but I could feel it. And it was there for a long time. And then it started getting like, if I would really sit with it, it was like louder and louder and louder. I was lucky because it didn't get, some people, they don't listen to the intuition, they don't listen. And then eventually something happens, like a health issue, an accident, or something that is really trying to put all the attention in there. In my case, it wasn't that. I was able to catch it earlier than that. But it got louder and louder and louder. And my intuition at the end, it was like screaming, like, stop, we're not doing this anymore. And I think it's so important what you said, just being in contact with that intuition and trusting that it's right, that anything that we're going to choose from this intuitive place will be right for us. That's the truth. That's our truth. We don't need to doubt it. On the contrary, that's our compass.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
beautifully said. It's our compass. And you might have made some experiences in the past that make you doubt that. But when a lot of times when we look at those experiences, your intuition actually was right. And it was other people who kind of got in the way. Or sometimes we have coping mechanisms from the past that were trying to protect us in the past, and they're not very helpful anymore in the present. So we look at those as well. And people pleasing is a coping mechanism. You developed it because, just quick like reminder, people pleasing is developed as a coping mechanism because it feels safer to adapt to someone else than to be yourself. And when you've made that experience over and over again, it can be so scary to be yourself, because it hasn't felt safe in the past. But when people come to me, my clients, they are starting to realize it's not keeping me safe anymore, this coping mechanism. They can't maybe put it in these words, but they are starting to feel, hey, this is really hurting me, and this is really getting in my way of being myself and of living like a happy, fulfilled life. And so we work on getting a different perspective on that coping mechanism. But this kind of experience also sometimes makes people trust themselves less, because they're like, hey, how can my body let me down like that, like making me afraid to say something when actually it would be good for me. So we need to work on trusting that this too has a sense of purpose, like not purpose, but there is a meaning behind this feeling of fear about speaking up or saying what you really want to say, but that it's not really protecting you anymore, and that you can let it go. So there's, again, a couple of nuances. It's not as easy as saying like, okay, and now I trust my body completely and I trust my feelings completely, because there's like mechanisms that you need to understand in order to be able to do that. And it's best done in a like kind of like safe space and protected environment. And then you can go out and actually experience that in in the real world.
Absolutely. And let's imagine a person now who's in their job, listening to this episode, and they're wondering, am I actually living my purpose? Am I actually living my truth? Or am I people pleasing? And am I following what's expected of me? So, how could this person tell where they're standing as they listen to this conversation?
They already know. They already know. If they ask themselves this question, they already know the answer. And it's a very different feeling when you get up in the morning, for example, and you are intrinsically motivated by, living your purpose, or you're actually doing something to please others, working in a job to please others. It feels different. It's motivated by a kind of fear. What will happen if I don't work in this job? What will how will my status change, or how will people look at me? It's a very different way of being, and you already you know this. When you get up in the morning and you think about the day ahead, you already know if it's your dream job, or if you're just there because you think someone might expect you to do it. And that's fair, that no shame in that. That's like, for centuries people have probably not lived their purposes and their dream lives because it's a luxurious thing to do. It's a very privileged thing to do, right? Not everyone has the means to do that. So I think that's also really important to say, like, I don't know, a single mom raising 3 children might not be able to create her dream career just like that. It might take longer or be more complicated. But yeah, when you have that doubt and when you have that question that you just asked, I think people already know the answer.
And I can definitely relate to this, because now that I have my own business and now that I'm intrinsically motivated and I do things because I find them interesting, because I find them fun, because it helps develop the business and I get to serve more people. And now that I've tasted this intrinsic motivation, I realized that during my corporate years, 12 years, I was always driven by fear. Fear of the deadline. What if I miss the deadline? I'm also a recovering perfectionist. So fear that it's not perfect, fear that whatever, I don't get the promotion, fear that what happens if I lose this job. And it was always fear, fear, fear that was driving me. Anxiety, fear, a dysregulated nervous system that was kind of like, because it wasn't motivated in and of itself, I didn't want to see some of those projects come to life. And then fear had to kick in to actually get me, okay, let's do this. Maybe 2 days before the deadline, okay, let's do this. Like, I really need to do this. Instead of when you actually want to do something and you have 10 days, maybe you're, okay, let me research, let me talk to this person, let's do this, let's do that, because we actually want to see that project happening. And now that, this is my business, I really want to be doing this. I've chosen to have this conversation. I'm choosing, the clients that I work with. I choose everything that I do. I actually want to see those things come to life. I actually want to be doing all of those things. And it feels so different. But I think when you've only tasted the first one, it's kind of hard to imagine what joy on a daily basis feels like, what actual motivation in a day feels like. So I can definitely relate to what you said.
Yeah, and just to anyone listening who might be resonating with that, or who might be like kind of sad about this, I think we can all relate. And I think we've all kind of been in situations where fear was our main motivation and our main driver. And the best thing you can do is to realize that this is what's happening, and you don't have to change it right away, right? I want to take that pressure off everyone listening who thinks like, oh man, this is me. You don't have to change it right away. You don't have to make any drastic decisions or quit your job right away. The most important thing right now is to realize my main motivation on a daily basis is fear. And maybe that's not the best kind of motivation. So I think just to take the pressure off of that realization. Yeah, the realization in and of itself is very important, and maybe that's enough for now.
Absolutely. And then let's imagine that we go deeper into this road and imagine that many people who come and want to work with me, they come with this motivation. I want to have a greater impact. I want to be of service. I want to make sure that what I do is contributing to something bigger. And I feel like there's quite a nuance there. So how can we be of service? How can we help other people? Maybe help is not the right word, but how can we be of service to other people and live in our purpose without falling back into people pleasing?
Such a good question. And when I think about it, I think it's interesting to think about the opposite. Like what does it look like to be of service, but to people please at the same time? And I think it's totally possible, right? People are of service and there are people pleasers at the same time. But it's just a matter of time before they burn out, because when you people please by being of service to others, you forget yourself, you forget your needs, you don't respect your own boundaries, you don't know when to rest, when to say no, etc. And there are look at the world, there's so much to do and so many people in need and so many things that you can be in service of all the time. You need healthy boundaries to be able to be of service for a longer period of time. So it's just about being more, when you want to be of service for a longer time, you need healthy boundaries in place. So for example, in our businesses, we are of service to our clients and we are self-employed. So there's no one giving us any structure. Right? We need to make the structure ourselves, and we need to decide at some point, when do I respond to emails? When do I pick up the phone and respond to calls or messages? What kind of boundaries do I set in place for my clients to be able to reach me, but not all the time? It's important at some point to realize that you're not putting out fires and you're not an open heart surgeon. You can take your time to respond to your clients, even though they might be in distress at some point. It's possible that some clients are distressed. But the sooner you realize that you can be of service in a better way when you take care of your boundaries and when you take care of yourself first, the better. Yeah, you can absolutely be of service and not people please at the same time. So an example could be, a client asks, they really want to work with you and they ask to have very early meetings because they want to be coached before their day job. But for example, I'm not a person who gets up very early in the morning. Well, now I kind of am because I have a little kid, but even then, early mornings is not my time to shine. And I need the early morning now with my daughter and I need to get her ready, or when my partner gets her ready for kindergarten or for daycare, I sleep. I take the opportunity to get some more rest. So early morning is just not when I work. If I people pleased to get this appointment in place just to please my client because I'm afraid of losing my client if I don't do it, then I will probably not be the best coach I can be in the morning. I will be stressed, tired. My daughter will be playing in the background or something, right? I will be distracted maybe. So it's a way of thinking about things. You need to see that just because it would please her for a moment, it might not even be the best choice for working together. So either you find a different choice, like a different time slot that works for both of you, or maybe this is not your ideal client then, right? And saying no to this or setting this boundary in place is so important, because if you don't, you will not be the best coach and you will have a bad feeling about this coaching client relationship. And they might also not respect you at some point because you gave in at the very first opportunity and didn't stick up for yourself, right? So but I think it's about, long story short, I think it's about realizing that boundaries are not against the other person, but first of all for yourself, to be the best service person that you can be. And that is beneficial also for the other person.
Absolutely.
Right. So, yeah.
And in English, they have this phrase, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I always bring this. I like the metaphor because I can literally see it. I'm very visual as well. So I can literally see it. And I'm always thinking, if I'm going to be of service to people, how can I fill my own cup? And you touched and you talked a lot about boundaries, but it's also how can I make sure that my energy is high, that I feel good in my body, that my health is right. Literally fill my own cup with happiness, with abundance, with love, with wisdom, and with boundaries. And then from that place, then we can pour a lot if we want to other people, but first having our own cup super filled. And following on this train of thought about being a business owner and being a people pleaser, for example, or having people pleasing tendencies, how do you think this can show up for business owners? So we talked about boundaries, maybe not having strong boundaries. Do you see other things that can come up? Because I think having your own business, it's a spiritual experience. If a partner will be such a huge mirror, right? We learn a lot in a relationship, but we learn a lot more when we have our own business because it's going to be a mirror reflecting all of the wounds and all of the things and all of the fears and all of the things that we are here to heal, to transcend, to change. So how do you think people pleasing can appear for business owners?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is all around money, for example. In the end, we need money to keep the business running, right? It's not a charity, it is a business. And people pleasing can show up in lowering your fees for someone or not raising your prices in the first place because you're afraid of losing clients or of putting someone off. It can show up like not narrowing down on your niche or on your product because you're afraid of losing people. It could show up, for example, for me, I started with all English marketing. I posted in English, I had a newsletter in English, and my website is in English. For me, that was I realized at some point that was kind of out of the fear of losing clients if I didn't do that. And then at some point I realized, okay, but like 80-90% of my clients are actually German speaking. So I'm based in Berlin. A lot of my network is in Germany. And so a lot of clients came through that network. And so I realized, okay, I'm trying to speak to everyone, but it doesn't make that much sense. So I switched at some point to German. So sorry to everyone who can no longer understand my Instagram posts, but it was the right choice for me. So people pleasing can show up in this tendency of trying to appeal to everyone, trying to meet everyone else's needs, but not really following what you know or you think is the right next step for you. Yeah. So I think a lot of hiding, making yourself smaller than you actually are, also out of fear of shining bright and potentially putting people off with like your bright light. Yeah, it can show up in so many ways, but I think business related, I think the most interesting part in that is in the money topic. Yeah, not asking for what you know you are worth, for example.
Absolutely. And I can really resonate with the niching down because I think when I started, I was doing life coaching. So I could work with anybody and in my case, I made a choice. I wanted my business to be global. So I thought about it a long time. Then I said, okay, I'm going to do everything in English, even though my mother tongue is Spanish. But I've always had friends from all over the world. And I literally see myself as more like a citizen of the world rather than from a specific country. So I decided to do everything in English, and that was my choice, and I love it. But then when I started, for me, it made sense. But then in terms of the niching down, I started doing life coaching in the beginning. So I had several different situations. It could be love, it could be health, it could be career, it could be changing your career. I had literally a bit of everything. And at some point, after working with several clients, several different situations, etc., I realized actually my dream clients are the women who feel like they are done with a certain job. They're actually suffering in that job and they know they're here for more and they want more in their lives. And I help them acknowledge that and create something else, whether that's a new career in another job or even creating their own business. And I started seeing like some patterns, some women that I loved working with and traits that they had in common, and just the relationship that we had and the topics that we were discussing. And it was like really lighting me up, these type of conversations and this specific type of women. And I had that feeling in my heart, but then the people pleasing came and I was like, yeah, but how am I going to say no to men? Because I had some male clients. How am I going to say no to men? And I did have some men saying, but why are you talking only about women? Are we excluded of this thing? Can we not work with you? I had that. Then I had people who wanted to work on other topics, for example, like love and relationships. And at some point I decided I don't want to work on this topic anymore. I'm not resonating with this topic anymore. And I think I had the feeling that I wanted to niche down into life purpose and this type of transformation, but I kept for a little bit longer working on other topics because of people pleasing. And it was during a breathwork session with a magnificent breathwork practitioner that I had this download in my body from my own intuition, higher self, whatever we want to call it. And it was like, come on, Mars, like you literally want to do life purpose coaching, like just do that. And that's what I decided to do. And I basically niched down, but it was that people pleasing that I knew it in my body, but I was kind of like delaying the moment because I didn't want it to say no to these people and then to these other people. And what are these current clients are going to think? And then in the end, I did it. And now the clients that I have are literally all dream clients and we're having so much fun creating things together. But I definitely saw that people pleasing tendency is still there. Yeah. Having your own business is a spiritual experience.
Totally. And yeah, I can totally relate. And it means sometimes stopping the people pleasing means rejecting someone. And that's hard. And it's not something we want to do. But sometimes it's something we have to do in order to really serve the people that we're meant to serve. So I'm so happy that you had that realization at some point and that download and that you follow that path now. And I'm sure it brings, many new people into your life. And the other people who need like a relationship coach or who need something else, they will find their person. But it's so hard sometimes in the moment to see that and to see the bigger picture because you're in the fear of what will happen if I choose this and not that. I will disappoint some people. And a lot about learning to recover from people pleasing is learning to sit with the disappointment of other people. And that's hard. But it is not your responsibility and not your job and not even possible to make everyone happy. You will burn out trying to do that and you will never succeed. Well, yeah, at some point you need to learn to sit in the disappointment of others and just be okay with it. It's never going to be nice. It's never going to be super fun to disappoint people. And we don't want to make it our life calling to disappoint others. But we have to sometimes disappoint others to be our true self.
I love this. We sometimes have to disappoint other people to be true to ourselves. That's so nice. It's saying yes to ourselves. And sometimes it means that we say yes to some people and no to some people, and that's okay.
And so that's okay, and they will find their way. It's not, if you said, I think this is so important. So just a little bracket. If you say yes to someone in order to not disappoint them, you are already kind of disappointing them by not being honest and truthful to them. The no might hurt a little. It might disappoint them very obviously, but in the end, it's better for them to know what you're really all about as well, right? So they can then look for something else if they need something else.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's fair. It's not easy, but it's fair to disappoint people if need be.
Absolutely. So let's go a little bit deeper into the nuances of people pleasing because it is such a deep topic, and also the way you approach it and you've comprehended this topic is always so deep. So I'm curious about this very specific question. How do we realize if we are being kind because we're kind human beings, or if we're being people pleasers? Can we be kind without sacrificing ourselves?
Yeah. Yes. This is so important. Such an important question, and so important to understand that stopping people pleasing does not mean that you're not a kind person anymore. On the contrary, you might say that people pleasing is not kind. You're not being kind when you people please, when you adapt to others, when you neglect yourself to kind of, yeah, keep peace on the surface. You're not being kind. You're actually, and I say this also with a lot of caution because I know it can trigger a lot of people, but you can say that this is actually a manipulating behavior. So people pleasing can be manipulative. You're manipulating someone else to like you, to accept you, to not leave you, to promote you, or whatever it is that you're doing this for. So it's not nice to people please. You might think of yourself as a nice person, and you probably are, because you don't want to harm other people. You want the best for other people. But deep down, we need to understand that people pleasing is not that much about the other person. It's about ourselves, and it's about avoiding conflict for ourselves. It's about avoiding feelings that are unpleasant for ourselves. So there is a way to be nice without people pleasing. And the motivation, again, it's about the motivation. There's an intrinsic motivation to do something for someone. And in people-pleasing behavior, the motivation is fear. And it's an external motivation. It's because you think, what if I don't do this for that person, what will they think of me? They might think of me that I'm not lovable, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not a good friend, etc. So it feels different when you're actually nice because you have filled your own cup, because you can give from a place of fulfilled needs. It feels so much different. I just had this last week. A friend of mine asked me to if I could come with her to the hospital to get an injection that she was really scared of. And I thought, okay, this is such a perfect example of how I changed not so much my behavior maybe, but how the motivation behind it is so different, because I reflected on her request. It was actually when we had first scheduled our podcast recording, and I told her, oh, I actually have a podcast recording that during that exact time, but let me think about it. And then I realized, okay, but I really want to do this for her. And I can ask to reschedule the appointment. I mean, there's no rush in doing this podcast episode. So let me just ask if I can reschedule it. And I did. And I came back to my friend and I said, I would love to accompany you. What do you need? Do you want me to get you? I can ask for the car, and I can come get you, and so you don't have to, get
Think
there
about
any
the
other way.
driving.
Yeah, and it was so good for her that I was there. There was actually a moment where I was really helpful and where I was able to co-regulate her, or like she was able to co-regulate with me and calm her nervous system because I was there and I was calm. And it was such a lovely experience, although the thing itself was not pleasant, but it was a good like bonding moment for us. And it was just, and there was no second in which I felt like, okay, I'm doing this, but it's actually too much. I moved a podcast interview for her, so this better be like important to her or something like that. I remember doing things for others because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't do them. And it feels so much different. And there, can be so much resentment attached to that when they are not grateful enough, for example, in your opinion, right? Okay, now I moved this big appointment and I didn't do this, I didn't do that just to be here with them. She better be really grateful. And if she's not, then there's potentially some kind of conflict. But it will be conflict inside of me and never with her because, yeah, I'm a people pleaser. So, or I was a people pleaser. So this time it was really different. It was, I really took time to respond. Not much. It was just like a couple of minutes maybe, but I took time and I moved things around because I really wanted to be there for her. And I poured from a full cup and not from an empty one. And I was able to give this to her. And it was, yeah, it was beautiful. And it was a great experience, I think, for both of us.
And I think
that
we
is
go
nice.
back a little bit into what we were discussing before about the motivation. If I really we get this request from someone, whatever it might be, a service for a friend, whatever it might be, from a partner, whatever. If we just tune in with ourselves, we will know, do I actually, what would please me? Do I want to be there for that friend in times of needs? Do I want to support her through this? If the answer is yes, then we're doing that because we actually want to be there for the person. We want to give them that gift. And if they say thank you or not, whatever, we're not expecting another favor in return. We're not expecting a big thank you in return. We're not expecting anything. We want to be there because we love this person. And the motivation is love, care, tenderness for another person. Or we can tune in and we can be like, actually, I'm going to do this out of obligation. Actually, I'm going to do this out of fear that if I don't do it, what is she going to think? I'm going to lose this friendship, blah, blah, blah. So if we really tune in with ourselves, we know the motivation. And it's so beautiful how you took time to reflect and say, actually, I want to be there and I'm going to make it work in my schedule. I'm going to move things around because I want to be there for this friend. Yeah. And then it was a beautiful experience.
Yeah,
for both of you.
If she hadn't said thank you, which she did, but if she hadn't, it wouldn't have mattered because it was fulfilling in and of itself to be there for her. And I wanted to do that. Yeah, I think it's so important to make this distinction and to and there's a tendency for people pleasers to kind of talk themselves or to how do I explain this? Sometimes people pleasers know what their intrinsic motivation would be, but they talk themselves out of it, or they what their brain is telling them over what their body is telling them. So this is also like really important to practice. What is the layer underneath my thoughts? You know, the thought process might be one thing, but below that, there's a deeper knowing. And it can be super easy to say, okay, but I really want to be there for this friend and she's been there for me. Yeah, the motivation comes from inside me, when in fact it is a fear-based motivation, and you actually know that it is, but you can talk yourself into believing that it's not. So yeah, it comes back to this knowing.
Absolutely.
You know if it's an intrinsic or an extrinsic motivation, you know it.
I love it. And I love how you're always going into the nuances of everything. I love it. You think you know, but actually you're not. And there's another knowing.
Yeah.
I love it. And I wanted to focus because last time when we had the first conversation, I really wanted to go into a topic that we're going to go now, and we didn't have time. But I'm very curious because I would have the tendency to think that because of the way women have been educated, meaning that we need to be nurturing and accommodating and always smiling and nice and making everything round and pretty for other people, I would have a tendency to think, but I want to have your expert opinion on this, that maybe women struggle more with people pleasing than men. What's your view on this? And also, what's your experience with actual clients? Do you have more men than women dealing with this, or not at all?
Yeah, such an interesting question. And the answer again is nuanced. So I have more women clients than men clients. I did have a couple of male clients. I've kind of chosen to address more women now because I'm doing a group coaching program, for example, now, and I have kind of chosen to only include female or like, how do you say this in English correctly? Like not just women, but people who have been, who associate or who
define themselves.
Define themselves, thank you, as women, because I wanted to create this space where they would feel safe enough to open up about things. And I have I've made the experience that men tend to take up a lot of space in rooms and women tend to give it to them. And so I really wanted to avoid that. But that's a side note.
Is it? Is it?
Is it a side note? Well, just to say, I do have more female clients, but research shows that a lot more male or a lot more men tend to be people pleasers than we think. The exact numbers don't really matter because it's a question of who you ask and how you ask them to. But several different studies have shown that a lot of people pleasing tendencies just show up differently in men. So there are a lot of empathetic men who can sense your needs and who can adapt to your needs as well. But they might show up differently than women, exactly for the reasons that you said. Women are raised to be the caring, nurturing person in the room, etc. And men are usually raised to be the responsible, dependable, the nurturers in a different way. And I don't want to get into the gendered details here. I mean, we all know that we shouldn't raise our kids in this kind of binary way. Men should be raised to be nurturing as well, and women should be raised to be ambitious as well. But just to say that people pleasing does exist in men as well, but it might show up differently because they are less likely to show vulnerability, for example. So their people pleasing might look like adapting to certain environments to get that promotion, for example, or to keep up the image of being the super dependable person that you can lean on to be very strong, etc., to be the strong shoulder you can lean on. So I think a lot of men, and I hope there are some men maybe listening to this, can probably relate to all the problems that people pleasing brings along, neglecting your own needs for the sake of others. But it might show up a little bit different and it might not look like the typical female people pleaser. So there is a study from Stanford that showed that the percentage of people pleasers in male and female characters is really not that much different. But it might show up differently. And women might be more likely to talk about this, to self-identify as this, to work on this. Because it's less frowned upon, maybe, for women to open up like this. So yeah, there's nuances.
Yes. And so what I hear when I listen to this is, yes, it does exist in more or less the same level as in women. It's just that there's different expressions of it. And I'm thinking maybe people pleasing for men, it's let me get that promotion to the cost of overworking, neglecting my health, physical and mental health, so that I get that promotion, so that I can make maybe my partner happy because maybe we get a higher salary, whatever it might be. So, for example, it does exist, but in different ways. And it's interesting because in the beginning, I would have thought that it was mostly women, but also I think this is my observation. I think women nowadays are spending more time in self-development, doing meditation, doing yoga, doing all of the inner work. There are more and more men who are doing that. But if you go to certain spaces, you will, until now, always see more women than men. Maybe you go to a yoga class and there's, if you're lucky, 80% women and 20% men. I hope that is going to continue to change and evolve. But I think also women are doing more inner work. So maybe, as you say, they're talking more about this topic and they identify as recovering people pleasers or people pleasers, depending where they are. So that's very interesting to get that point of view from your side.
Yeah. And just a side note again, like if you are a man identifying as a people pleaser, just know you're not alone. You're not alone at all, and there's no shame in admitting it, and there is absolutely no shame in doing something about it. On the contrary, I think it shows a lot of strength to acknowledge that you're suffering from some form of people pleasing and that you want to do something about it. And yeah, the world is a better place when less people please. It's just, we need more people who are in their actual power and who are actually able to give from a full cup and not from an empty cup, and not
Absolutely.
running on anxiety and deadlines and adrenaline, but running on intrinsic motivation to be of service in this world.
Absolutely. So beautiful. And I think this is really nice to end the episode. And I would like to ask you one last question. With all of the experience that you have with people pleasers, being, yourself a recovering people pleaser, myself as well, a recovering people pleaser. If we have someone listening to this episode and they do resonate with this, what is something you wish this person knew at a cellular level? What do they need to know?
They need to know that they are okay the way that they are right now, that they have always been okay, and that they will be okay the way that they are, and that they are lovable and worthy and beautiful the way they are, and they don't need to adapt, but that their adaptation and their people pleasing makes a lot of sense, and that it's not a character trait but a behavior that you can change to be more happy, and you deserve to be more happy.
So beautiful. I think we're going to leave it at that. There's a lot of things to reflect upon. Thank you so much, Steph, for coming to the show again with your beautiful, sweet energy, with all of these nuances and depth that you bring to the table. None of this is, cookie cutter like formulas and things. I think many of the things that you're sharing is because you've felt them yourself. You've helped many, many, many clients go through all of this. And you've seen this situation from so many different angles that the debate and the conversation gets super rich because of all of those nuances that you bring to the table. So thank you so much. I'm super happy for having you on the show again.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. I will see my listeners in the next episode. And in the meantime, in Blisstopia we trust.